Okay, so today might be the shortest video of them all, largely because we covered a lot of this already in the class on the scientific method. But what I want to emphasize today is that you can do experiments in political science, and there's some really fantastic research that's done so, and you're going to read some after you're done this little video lecture. So every experiment generally has the same features, whether this is an experiment in the natural world or the health world or the political world. The main feature is that there are at least two groups. An experimental group, which is subjected to a treatment, so it is also called a treatment group, or there's multiple experimental groups with different treatments. And the key thing is there is a control group, which is not subjected to the treatment. What we do then is we measure the outcome in both groups to determine the impact of the treatment on that outcome. So here's an example from natural sciences. So what is the impact of water on a seed sprouting? Okay, so let's take a look here in our lovely little picture. So which one is the experimental group and which one is the control group? So obviously the experimental group is the group that gets water. The control group does not get any water. The treatment here, in this case, the independent variable is the treatment. Usually that's the case. The treatment is the water. So we believe that adding water is going to lead to more seed sprouting. So the outcome that we're measuring is the number of seeds that have sprouted. That's our dependent variable. In this case, we see that the one that got water has more seeds to sprout than the one that did not get water. Now, what we probably want to do is get a whole bunch of pots and do a whole group of them with water, a whole group of them without water, just so we could have a more confidence that it wasn't just that you had some dud seeds in one of the pots. And so that's generally the idea behind an experiment. It's pretty simple and self-explanatory. The key thing, of course, being that there needs to be both experimental group or control group. In this, there's only one experiment and one control, but we'd have a whole collection of pots. In some cases, we should also just measure the potential outcome before and after the treatment is applied for both groups, just in case the lapse of time or other environmental factors will produce the outcome without any intervention. So for example, if you're looking at the impact of a policy on childcare over time, you're going to want to also measure what's the change in a group that had no access to childcare. Because they might just over time, the parents are getting older, they get better at raising their kids, whatever it is. And so maybe the kids' outcomes are better for everybody over time. So what you want to really see is the rate of improvement in the kids' reading levels or whatever better with this childcare option versus without. There's a few different settings that you can conduct an experiment in. There's a lab setting, so you can actually do experiments in a laboratory. So for example, my previous supervisor did some work where she was actually measuring the physiological responses in people's brains with different political stimuli, which was very cool. You can also do a lab experiment where you are using eye tracking software to see what kind of news people are going to based on what kind of prompts they receive. You can also test maybe the impact of a specific tool that's used to combat disinformation and see if it actually works better than people not getting any sort of tool at all. Are they better able to spot the disinformation? So you can actually do, an experiment in a laboratory with humans. A survey experiment is very common these days. You can do essentially a survey or a poll, and essentially two groups of respondents. One group of respondents gets one particular prompt or information, the other one gets nothing, or they get some sort of placebo or some sort of thing that is not really related to the research. So in my example earlier about single transferable vote, that they got the Xerox information, had nothing to do with electoral systems, but I just still wanted them to sit and read something. And then you ask the same sets of questions and see if those two groups differ based on that information they got. So for example, if one group gets disinformation and one group gets accurate information, does that change who they choose to vote for? A field experiment takes place out in the world. And so for example, going to every second house to provide information about recycling and then seeing if those houses, they got info about recycling as opposed to a flyer about the local pizza place are more likely to put out their blue boxes on garbage day. Actually, you probably would want to use a flyer for a pizza place, because then it's possible that all the people who got the pizza flyer would decide to go get pizza, and then they'd have pizza boxes in their blue boxes. Anyway, so maybe they would get another random flyer about nothing, or maybe they just wouldn't get anything, because honestly, I don't think there's much difference. But yeah, so you can actually do things out in the world, or for example, where you'll test a new thing. So for example, maybe we were going to implement online registration in a country. We wanted to know first if it would work. We'd implement it in one area, and then the neighboring area that is very similar otherwise, we'd see, we would not implement it, and then we'd compare those two areas. Now, of course, the problem with that that's tricky is that there could be existing differences between the two areas. So we'd have to measure for that in advance. But you can definitely do field experiments. And that's where it gets to one of the most popular field experiments in political science. So this is one of the kind of more revolutionary ones. This is by Alan Gerber and Donald Green. The effect of canvassing, telephone calls, and direct mail on voter turnout, a field experiment. Let's see if they just have an abstract here that I can tell. Okay, so essentially what they did is they're at Yale University, so they were doing this field experiment in New Haven, Connecticut. And essentially they wanted to know if people receive personal canvassing, direct mail, or telephone calls before an election, are they going to be more likely to go out to vote? So their actual research question was, is there a way we can get more people out to vote? And is that way through one of these three means? So what they did is they got a bunch of students to go canvassing. Either somebody knocked on your door, somebody was given direct mail, so they got a letter in their mailbox saying like, hey, you should go vote. Or they got a telephone call and said, hey, you should go vote. And then what they did is they wanted to compare those groups with a control group that didn't get any sort of information about encouraging them to go vote. And then what they did is they compared the groups, and they found that personal canvassing increased voter turnout significantly. A little bit did direct mail increase voter turnout, and telephone calls not at all. And so they say that what we think about voter turnout is that people really want to get face-to-face mobilization, that if they have some sort of social pressure in terms of a physical person being like, hey, you should vote, they're less likely to ignore it than if they just get a telephone call. And I think there's previous things. Those are the assignments. Yeah, okay. So this is just were they contacted in person or not. So 59% voted who were contacted in person, 44% were not contacted, or sorry, 44% of the people who were not contacted decided to vote. Wait, is that? Not contact. Oh, right, okay. It's right here where they attempted contact. Let me go find, there's a really nice chart. Where the heck is the chart? This is linear regression. Anyway, I can't find it. Point being, they compare those three groups, and they find support that if you contact somebody in person, they're going to be more likely to turn out to vote. So I'll pop this article into the Moodle because it would be really useful for you to read it. And then you can go and find, I should have found it and like flagged it ahead of time. Effective unadjusted relationship with actual contact and voter turnout. Okay. Percentage voting number. Oh yeah. Okay, so I was right to begin with. So essentially the thing that they're doing here is essentially they want to control for the fact that some people, they would try to contact them personally, but they couldn't. So like some people just aren't home, and that's going to change who you're going to be able to capture. And so that's why they adjusted it to attempted personal contact. So the people that they can even see like people who you even attempted to contact had a higher percentage of voter turnout than those who were assigned to the control group and didn't have any personal contact. Okay, so I was right all along, but I'll still pop this in the Moodle, in the Moodle so that you can see the difference. It's a really classic experiment that we use frequently to refer to as a really well-designed experiment in political science. So let's just go over to experiments assignment. That's the one I was talking about. I'm not going to give you this one. So I'm going to pick one of these. Probably I'm going to pick this one. Yeah, I'll pick this one. So what you're going to do is you're going to read this particular article. It's another good example of an experiment done in political science. And you're going to fill out the questions. So what is the research question? What are the expectations of the author? What type of experiment is it? Why is it the most appropriate method? What was the treatment or treatments? How is the outcome measured? Where were the subjects drawn from? And describe any other details about the procedure and setting. And then what are the results? Yeah, I'll just pick one rather than getting you guys to pick from a bunch of them because that'll just be easier, I'll be honest, when I go about to market. But maybe I'll pop some of the other ones because there's some really cool experimental research done in political science. And I think it's some of the kind of gold standard, fantastic research that gives some really good insights into how people interact in the political world and what sort of interventions can improve our political world.